Good afternoon and welcome to the Procurecon Future of TV webinar. My name is Nigel Gilbert. I'm with Accenture, based out of London in the UK. Today, we want to discuss all elements of the value chain, what's changed and what we think will change across broadcast and TV. As we know, over the last 12 to 24 months, a great deal has changed, not just with the consumer, how they consume the content, but also how the content is created, how the broadcasters can then monetize that content, and naturally how the brands can also therefore engage, what production requirements they have, what their value chain looks like as well. Lots of complications. Before we get into it, I'll allow the panel to please introduce themselves.
Hello, Nigel. My name's Graham Adams. I am Head of Media at BT. I look after all of BT Group's paid for media operations. At BT, we operate 3 different brands. We have BT, EE and PlusNet, and we're active across consumer and B2B markets. Our activity covers all bases. We do brand advertising, consideration advertising, and direct acquisition activity as well. So, our advertising and media keeps myself and my procurement colleagues pretty busy. Thanks for having me.
Hi there, I'm Pete Markey. I'm the CMO for TSB Bank, and I look after all of the brand and marketing across the UK.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Islan, Director of Advertising Data and Analytics at ITV. My team and I are responsible for addressable insights, targeting products, measurement solutions for ITV's advanced advertising.
Hi Nigel, hi everyone, my name is John Lewis. I'm Head of Digital and Partnership at Channel 4. So I'm responsible for all the non-spot traditional revenue streams. That includes VOD, digital, partnerships, sponsorship, content, and also our newly delivered studio social revenue stream.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback, so if we can all make sure we're on mute when we're not talking. This is my first virtual webinar, so I'm learning as I go. So can the viewers just bear with us? I'm sure some of the panelists have been here before, so we'll see how we go. So certainly something that's obviously very pertinent to where we are today is the rapid change that we've seen over the last 6 months. As discussed at the top there, we know that a lot has changed in the world of broadcast on both ends of the spectrum, but over the last 6 months, that's been rapidly accelerated and impacted across, again, as we mentioned, the entire value chain. So if we can start with the brands, Graham and Peter, what have been the main challenges and opportunities, of course, that you've seen over this accelerated period? Graham.
Yeah, it was a massive change for us across this period. I mean, we briefly stopped our usual approach. At the time of COVID, we were really worried about call center capacity. We're trying to manage more vulnerable customers. We had a lot of people calling up about BT Sports subs that we needed to talk to. And it didn't really seem right to try to keep advertising in a way that generates a lot of calls into our service centres when we knew there were a lot of people that needed a lot of support, current customers who needed a lot of support. We did restart very soon afterwards, several days on some channels, a few weeks later on others. And we very gradually and carefully ramped our spends back up to our normal DR acquisition levels. And now we're back active across all channels and in all media. That's from an acquisition point of view. From a brand and consideration point of view, we just ripped up our plan for 2020 and started again, actually. We had a great plan, but we knew we needed to, it was a different time, and we had to recognize that times had changed and we needed to do new things. So we looked at doing 2 new things. On EE, we put out a campaign giving free data to NHS workers, and we got that out just at the end of March and into the early part of April. On the BT side, we also did a new campaign, but what we wanted to do is help people get more out of technology in lockdown. A lot of people were struggling with this, and we felt we had a role to help. We partnered up with ITV. We ran a series of what we call top tech tips. It's a series of practical guides to help solve issues that that we knew people were having during lockdown. What we looked at search trends to see what people were searching and what they needed a hand with and what they were struggling with, and we did a series of guides to help them. And we used, some of our brand ambassadors and partners to help us with that. We'd Claire Balding doing a show, a short piece about how to set yourself up on WhatsApp, which my mum found very useful. Started doing video calls off the back of it. David Williams, who's as well as a ITV star, as a kids author, and he did a great piece about homeschooling, keeping your kids active while they were off school. With Peter Jones doing a piece about small business trips and tips. All in with about 15 different guys. We ran them out every day. We ran out a slot in the morning because there was a lot of viewing changing, big peaks in viewing across the day. So we did a slot out at 10:30, and then we did something in the 6:15 early evening news. Two slots you wouldn't normally pick out for brand advertising, but it worked really well for us. We ran this out for a few weeks. And tracking measured showed that it worked well. A very different sort of campaign from us, not the sort of thing we'd usually do. A very different sort of media behaviour, but through the constraints we had, we did something that was really different. I think it was helpful for people, and it worked well for our brand.
That's great.
Yeah, and Nigel, building on from what Graham said, I think for us as a business, TV still remained a really important channel, but we used it differently. And I think our campaign strategy and approach changed. We were planning quite a different bit of activity through the period after lockdown, but it took the opportunity really to step back and listen, and as well as doing what we could to look after the most vulnerable customers and customers in need through other channels, we used our advertising and content channels really to communicate ways we could help. And we did that by stepping back, listening to what people were asking us. So people worried about fraud, people worried about repayment holidays, and people worried about being able to access our services when branches and call centres were busy and under a lot of pressure. So we created 3 bespoke mini ads that we filmed. Again, this isn't unique. We didn't do them Zoom style. We actually sent cameras to people's homes. We filmed them remotely. We put those out on air, monitor performance and tracking, and then optimize the ones that were performing the best and best at answering the questions that customers had, and then kept those running for 3 or so months, just through the critical period of lockdown as well. So our mix did change quite a lot, but it was all about listening, all about being responsive. And I think actually, as we're probably all going to testify, actually working under pressure and with different constraints, but still being able to get work done and work done really quickly. And the final bit I was just going to mention is our first venture into ad-funded programming, which we did as a combination working with ITN and Channel 4. We did a program about lockdown heroes. That was a really great project to get involved with, really great to help fund and produce a program that recognized the amazing people and all they've done. And we were able to put idents and content around that, similar to what we put in our TV ads as well. So great that actually innovation opportunities came on the back of the difficult situation from lockdown as well.
Very good, and also very unplanned but synergistic affiliations that we were able to call out there. So well done, chaps. Just very much before we move on, we're 1 or 2 minutes ahead of time. Are we able to just briefly touch on, from your side, what changes you saw in the ability to actually change and rev the content that you were able to produce? Because of course, in the context that you've just described, presumably you need a lot more treatments, and you need some sort of agility about what you can actually then put out. How did you find that had changed? Apologies. Please go ahead, Graham. I'm sorry.
Well, so from my point of view, some similar to some of the stuff that Pete said. Actually, we had to have, we were sending cameras around to people's houses to do it. It was really difficult to do the filming. I mean, I'm fortunate I don't actually have to do the filming, but I know that it was, I know that everyone involved in that found it difficult. Similarly, we were keen not to just sort of replicate a Zoom call, and we wanted to get as close to the sort of real experience as possible. But it was challenging, and I think for the people that were doing the ad shoots, they were having to video call in to do them because they couldn't go to people's houses. So it was it's tricky to make it happen.
Yeah, and I can relate to a lot of what Graham's saying. I think it really showed actually working with the agencies and how actually we really had to work well remotely, which of course none of us had done before. And then you're briefing in creative, working on creative, looking at concepts for creative, and also trying to imagine something that's you've never done before, something you also need to do really quickly. So actually, usually you have a long sort of period before you get something on air. And actually, when you go, well, actually, I need this on air in 2 weeks' time, you think, God, we've never done that before. And so that was incredible, being able to do that, see the work, but also keep the quality bar up, because anyone could produce something in a couple of weeks that's not very good. But I think producing something where the quality bar is kept high, high enough for the brand, still good content, and also content that's flexible enough for you to change, was really important as well. And again, with the ITN Channel 4 experience was great, working directly with media owners, helping see the editorial for content and where that was going, and being involved in then how our work would sync with that and work with that was really powerful as well. So, but no, it was all about new ways of working and working with a lot of agility and pace.
Well, thank you very much. So moving across then, speaking of the media owners, Lara, starting with you, what are the key changes, challenges, and opportunities that you've seen, particularly over the last 6 months?
Make sure I unmute myself. Well, I think we've talked a lot about changing consumer behavior, Nigel. You mentioned it right up front. And it has been discussed in depth across many of these types of webinars. And of course, the latest Ofcom report, provided a lot of insight. I think one stat in particular really was really illuminating. So they compared the total consumption per day in April this year versus the same period last year, and it was up something like an hour and a half. So from just under 5 hours a day to 6.5 hours a day. And so that a lot has been said about changes in consumer behavior. I think it's worth noting that we've seen these changes in consumer behavior happening over the last few years. So this was already an evolving phenomenon. I think what we've seen this year is, as you rightly said, there's been a rapid acceleration, but also huge variation in consumer behavior. So from a data and analytics team perspective, it feels a little bit like we've observed, potentially years of change in just a matter of months, in terms of acceleration, but also in terms of the mix. If I look back on the last 6 months, we've seen at least 3 phases, I would say. Early lockdown, obviously, when people were consuming a lot more live news and current affairs programs because they were keen to be informed. Then that shift towards more entertainment content for, perhaps more escape, a little bit escaping from the day-to-day. Easing of lockdown, and the summer, we had a wonderful summer this month, but it also coincided with limits in our ability to do certain programs. So there was another shift there, and obviously now production is ramping up again, but there's lots of uncertainty around restrictions. So consumption is changing again. So it's not static by any means. Both Graham and Pete use the word flexible and agility, and I think this is the main learning coming out of this. How do we keep our pulse? I'm going to say that data is important, obviously, from where I sit, but how do we keep pulse of what's happening? How do we, find themes and opportunities in this ever-changing, consumer behavior and a wider economic landscape, so that we can create, ongoing, continued good programs, good service for our viewers, but also highlight the opportunities for advertisers, partners, and customers as well.
Thanks, Lara. John, similarities, I'm sure. What's your view?
Yeah, it's very similar to Lara, actually. But I mean, I suppose, I look at the last, 6 or 8 months, really kind of in a few phases, really. The initial phase was very much, the panic, I suppose, in kind of like March, April, May, where we were seeing revenues decline circa sort of 40-50%. So there was a kind of like a massive move to reduce our cost base as quickly as possible. So the first thing was really just restricting our commissioning budget and bringing that down by 150 million, which is obviously quite significant, and also reducing our fixed cost base. So that was kind of you know, that was almost like really sort of bracing what we thought was going to be a very, very difficult year. And then we had this sort of second phase that we experienced, which was almost like where the innovation kicked in, and picking up on really what Pete was talking about. We just did things differently, and we commissioned smarter. We very much were thinking about how we could drive innovation in the current circumstances under the restricted budgets. And we were still commissioning content through that kind of lockdown period in the summer, but we were doing it differently. So Grace and Perry's Art Club was a really great example of a breakthrough show that resonated with an audience, and was just Grace and Perry in his house with his wife, communicating and engaging with the audience. We did more ad-funded programs, ad-funded shows during that period, and we've done probably in the 6 months previous, where we were stimulating a market with advertisers such as TSB, and coming up with new ways of working and commissioning, which was really, really exciting. And also still trying to get out there and launch new products, be that data products, or also launching our For Studio social initiative. And really what that's done is that's kind of allowed us to kind of take a different view on how we approach commissioning content, and just really approach the business model moving forward, which I think has opened up a lot more opportunities than maybe it closed. And I think what we're now seeing is this, I suppose, this crazy situation where we've got the bounce back. So we're now seeing in Q4, dare I say it, and I say this very tentatively, but we're actually seeing revenue growth in Q4 in television. But also, I suppose more importantly, we're seeing record growth in viewing. So, and I wouldn't say, and that's not just across maybe older audiences, it's the youngs, it's the 16 to 34s that are arguably coming back to TV because it's a safe place, and it's a place where they're definitely re-engaging. And we're seeing shows performing out their skin, Gogglebox, Celebrity Gogglebox, Celebs Go Dating. I mean, I can reel them off. I mean, Bake Off's probably the best example, where Bake Off came back to our screens. And Bake Off was filmed in like a hermetically sealed production set over the late summer, but we pulled it off, and it came back and it did a storming 11 million in its first showing. And that's the biggest audience on Channel 4 since 1985. I mean, it's like, oh my God. You know, I'm not trying to say, okay, we've had a good COVID, but we just learned a lot. But I think this swing back into engagement with AV television, but also VOD, and I've not even talked about you know, the digital growth that we experienced on all four. But over that period in the summer, where we were seeing people binging on box sets, and particularly young audiences watching the likes of Father Ted or Inbetweeners for the first time. They hadn't watched the first showing, obviously, because you know, they're too young. So we've got, you know, 15 to 20-year-olds watching shows that they've never watched before. So yeah, so it's been a really interesting year, a lot of learnings, but I feel that in a way, TV's, as a result, in a much stronger place than it probably was at the beginning of the year.
I love this idea of bringing new audiences back to TV, partially because they're forced to stay in, but it's these eyeballs that people a year ago would have said are drifting away or they're being lost. And actually it's bringing new audiences back. I've definitely experienced the Bake Off revolution in my house, I can tell you that. But thanks, that's great insight from all four of you there. Well, if we then take that theme forward then, and this idea, of course, that we've all learned a lot as consumers, and of course in our business lives over the last 6 months, there is to an extent, therefore, going to be a lot of things that will stick and that we're going to have to just get used to. And of course, this notion of acceleration in tools, systems, data, new competitors, which we haven't really talked a lot about up to this point, and of course, media procurement itself. If we come back to Graham and Pete, Graham, starting with you, can we get a sense, therefore, of how you see? It's very hard to look into the future, but a bit beyond, let's say the next year, if you like. What do you think you're going to have to really do differently that you can share?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're still big on television. We invest, we invest a lot into it, and there's some really good examples of how some good examples of big programs that are doing well for a range of different audiences. But one of the things we are spending a lot of time trying to get right is just how to manage our TV spends across the different age groups. We are seeing different performance. If we are putting out a campaign that maybe has an average frequency of about 10, we'll see it up over 15 for 65 pluses and down nearer 5 or 6 for 1634s. And that's a massive change. And for some of our brands, that is a big issue. So we're having to intervene a lot. We're having to go longer on forward. We're having to make that work in all its component parts far harder than we've seen before. I mean, we've got a plan coming up, 600 ratings on it. Reach level is going to be actually for the first time under about 70% for some of the audience groups we're after. So we're really having to dial up our VOD investment to compensate for that. So I think what it means, we're having to really get into the tactics of the way we use TV, that those decisions are so important now, the sort of craft skills that you put in place for it. So the mix of buying audiences that we're bringing to bear and the conversion audiences we're going after. I feel we're having to work these far harder than we have in previous years. And I think really you're seeing a talent that we look, for our internal teams and the agencies to help us with is knowing when to broadcast and when to use addressable audiences. Because the answer is in the blend, but the more that we can get understanding of how to blend broadcast and addressable channels, the more successful will be. So a real need for craft skills on both, which is, craft skills on TV planning, but also craft skills within the digital space and working out how to put together the various different forms of broadcast or VOD, online video, and some of the social channel video that we have, how to bring in those together to the best overall effect.
Thanks, Graham. And Pete, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I know it's been a difficult 6 months, but I hope if anything we take out of it, some of the speed and agility we've sort of developed collectively and developed with our agencies, I want to keep that continuing. And I think we're going to need it because, as you said, Nigel, there's no crystal ball here and the environment is constantly changing. So we're going to need as brands to be able to work with media owners and agencies to respond even faster and even better in a very, very uncertain climate and environment. And building on what Graham's saying, I do think that I guess the use of data is going to come more and more in prevalence. First of all, through traditional buying ways, but also, as Graham was saying, with how you buy audiences programmatically through the likes of, we've just signed a deal with InfoSum. We're going to be using our first-party data to buy, audiences through Channel 4, for example. Through Channel 4's 4OD and other platforms. Global radio are in there with DAX and so on. So I think something really, for me, exciting, I think it's almost been accelerated is, the need to, for us as brands to focus even more on the latest technologies to reach audiences in the right way. And clearly that makes our budget more effective and efficient, I hope. Plus also, I think this sort of fleet of foot stuff, if we're going to need as brands to respond to the changing environment of what the next phases of COVID and mini lockdowns bring as well. And I think that, this podcast will probably age badly, but regional lockdowns, as is the current situation right now, actually, do we get to a point where we're going to need regional treatments behind what we're doing, on a city by city or region by region basis, which some media allows you to do better than others. So it's all going to be about the flexibility.
Yeah, that's great insight there from both of you chaps there. And this notion of the use of data across the platform, and Graham, as you were mentioning as well, pulling it in from social channels as well. So part of it is necessity, of course, and part of it is this ability to now address this medium. I think more so than has been the case before. Well, look, you'll all be pleased to know we are doing well for time, so happy days. On that note, let's move across, Lara, again, starting with you. Can we get your view then on what you think the biggest priorities, if you like, challenges, opportunities are going to be for you over the next 12 months or so?
So I think the learning that will stick, which is something everyone has said already, we basically got a crash course what it means to be flexible, both, in terms of our internal ways of working, but also how we, how we do business, how we, as ITV, how we build content, how we work with our partners and customers. We all know that this need for flexibility is not a new thing. Nigel, you mentioned new competitors, and they're not on the horizon, they're here, they have been here. And if anything, this period has, sort of been a bit of a catalyst for everyone. So we've all had to up our game pretty quickly. So these market dynamics are nothing new. The writing was already on the wall, as it were. I think, from ITV's perspective, we've obviously made some big technology investments in order to get ourselves into a position to, to compete effectively, to continue to, run, effective, feasible business models for now and going forward. Obviously, we've recently launched our programmatic media platform, Planet V. The investment behind this was very much, driven by that ambition to be much more flexible and offer many more features that advertisers need in terms of being more agile and more performance and return on investment focused. So in a way, it's a good time for us to be talking about the new technologies. The other piece which both Pete and Graham mentioned is the importance of data. Again, this is nothing new, but because of that, the acceleration and the huge variation in consumer behavior, that along with that goes all of the data, the changes, the ups and downs in the data signals that we get, which gives us different opportunities that need to be translated from ones and zeros into actual opportunities, actual insights, actual product, actual addressable opportunities. So my team, for example, have been really focused on how we build our products to be more dynamic from source. So it's not just about building certain audience segmentation that age over time, but really it's all based on models that are continuously updating. So there's been a huge effort there, especially ahead of the Planet V launch. So brand new set of products there that aims to capture this kind of speed and changes in the market. And actually, on the point of data, and Pete mentioned InfoSum, and I know that John and the team at Channel 4 are also working with them. We've recently completed a commercial partnership with InfoSum and a strategic investment in the company, and it's exactly that need for us to be able to collaborate on the basis of data. With all of the change happening, with all of the threats of kind of new competition, different competitive landscape that's, as everyone said, just accelerating. We need to think about collaboration in a much more proactive way, and our investment and partnership with InfoSum very much underscores this ambition, to be able to work in a data privacy compliant way, to bring data sets together, both from an activation perspective for our advertisers who are looking for return on investment, but that also potentially working with other media owners and broadcasters and other data partners, so that we can start to build, kind of a more collaborative approach that will hopefully help the entire ecosystem. So, definitely on the technology and data front, a lot has been done, and a lot will continue to be done, I think, into the next year or two.
Amazing. Thank you, Lara. John, let's come to you. We've got a few minutes there, and we may even get the chance to get a quick takeaway from our friends, the brands as well, before the end, just to get a sense of some of the other new tools and skills that they're thinking they might need to develop on their side. But what are you seeing, John?
Yeah, well, it's great to hear from Lara in terms of what ITV are doing. And I think it's very much the broadcaster's job, really, at the moment, to sort of drive sort of innovation, both in data and also programmatic buying, because what Graham was saying. It's almost like me and Pete planned this session, isn't it, in terms of some of the things that we've been doing. But I suppose, I'm obviously going to kick off in relation to data and some of the stuff that we've been doing, and also you know, the furrow that ITV are also ploughing in terms of the importance of first-party data and the ability for clients to bring their own data and match that to data on, or to users on all 4 users. So basically buying their own bespoke segments, we believe is pretty game-changing, and I think that's definitely the trajectory of travel for us as a business as we move forward over the course of the next 12 months. We've got dozens of relationships now, direct relationships with clients such as TSB, which we've been forging over the last 6 months or so. And the ambition is to really expand that and to start delivering back, hopefully, some meaningful attribution to those matched data points, so we can really sort of see how media buying on digital, but then also as we move out into addressable linear, can deliver, you know, real return on investment. I think the other area for me is around cross measurement across digital and linear. I think that's the thing that we need to really be focused on, because I'm sure that Graham and Pete are asking the question, you know, how much incremental reach is my VOD campaign delivering versus my linear campaign, and how is it measured on a campaign by campaign basis that deduplicates linear, the reach on linear and digital. And that's something that's going to be coming hopefully very soon in Q1 or Q2, which is the C-Flight proposition, which all of the broadcasters are collectively aligned on. So we definitely see a significant shift there, and hopefully an upturn in terms of the confidence, I suppose, in clients and advertisers investing across, you know, the whole suite of both linear and digital. And I think the final thing for me is just around how we commission smarter, and just leaning back into Pete's point around driving advertiser-funded programming and commissioning. I very much feel that the narrative has changed within Channel 4 in terms of the importance of encouraging brands to co-fund and commission with us for not just shows that might sit in shoulder peak or in daytime or late night. These are, you know, how can we open up opportunities for brands where we can have long-term meaningful partnerships where they're commissioning formats across a year or across multiple years. And I think opening up those conversations with brands moving forward is also going to be really exciting.
Brilliant, thanks. Well, you've managed to tee that one up for me brilliantly there, John. Why don't we ask Graham and Pete if they are indeed thinking about this notion of measurement and attribution cross-platform, because now, of course, people don't just consume Channel 4 or ITV via the telly. They're on multiple devices. Graham, first, is this coming up for you? Is this priority?
Yeah, it is. We spent a lot of time debating this and speccing out tests for it. You know, we're looking at channel tests on YouTube, seeing how that works with TV in the right way, calibrating the actual, you know, the weights on that. You know, as Jonathan said, we're very interested in the C-Flight stuff, how that will work, you know, linear with broadcaster VOD. We're looking at data from the Audience Project, looking at TV plus online channels. And I think we're all waiting for Barb and Dovetail to come along. But I'd probably say there's a lot of different types of measurement that we're having to get our heads around as advertisers. And I think actually I'm very interested in the work that ISBA and the WFA are doing with Origin. And it's a bold piece that looks at giving that overarching measurement piece. Now, it's not a trading currency. They're looking at a planning tool that will help understand, and for us to just get our arms around the change in consumer behavior that there is, and how to just work out the different levers and TV and VOD and all of its guises, how they would work together, and how we can sort of craft the right blend for the different briefs that we're looking at. So anyone that hasn't had a look at Origin, I'd encourage them to do so.
Jolly good. Well, just because we're going to be up on time, Graham, I do apologise. Pete, similar sentiment there?
Yeah, definitely agreeing with everything Graham says. Look, measurement's going to be really important, particularly in an environment when budgets are under massive pressure. And I think it's something we need to keep working with the media owners on. But echo what Graham says, and I think it's more important now than ever.
Wonderful. Well, I don't believe we've managed to time it so fantastically well, but we have. And so well done, everybody. I think this has been a really, really interesting discussion, and often we forget about some of the more important elements of the value chain. Just think about the consumer. But in this instance, just remains me to thank Graham, Pete, Lara, and John. Thank you very much for everybody for viewing. See you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks, everyone.